was there, in terms of the order of speakers, is it Carol, then Dan, then Michelle, or is it Carol, Michelle, Dan? Does it matter?
Really, it's however you guys want to jump on there. I just, whoever wants to go after the IEPA is fine with me.
Okay.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming, joining on this Zoom meeting. We had to come up with a training session for professional development. And one of the things that I'm even come across this year was that we have to start writing our plan. And I feel like there's more than just myself that was feeling a little overwhelmed with the decisions that we have to make in getting all that started. So we had some great suggestions. Thank you, Carol, Hannah, Michelle, Dan, IEPA, for jumping on this and coming together to just give your input to everyone to let them know, should I write the plan myself, or, are we going to hire someone to do it? So, I'll hand it off to Ernie, and thank you very much again for deciding to come on and speak today.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to do it. And if anybody's able to kick Chet out of the meeting, I would appreciate it so that he doesn't hear what I have to say. I'm going to try to share my screen. I have never done this in Zoom before, so I think I can do this. Tell me if you see my presentation. Can you see that?
Yep, we see it.
Yes.
All right. Let me just get it started here. So I have prepared a presentation today, but I am by no means tied to doing this. So, if people would rather just shoot questions at me, I'm happy to get distracted from what I've presented or from what I've prepared. So I'll go on and get started with it. And then as we go through, just feel free to interrupt me and ask whatever you want to. And before I get started, I guess I wanted to say that, we're here as a resource as you guys are developing your plans. We would really like this to be more of a collaborative effort with people. So we would love if we were involved in the beginning when you get started, so that we can help maybe direct your energies depending on what your solid waste district is like, help you kind of understand the format can be a little bit overwhelming the way it is. And so, if you just take it piece by piece, it's not so bad. And we might be able to help direct efforts that way so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. Because we oversee the state, we can give you, if somebody else has been doing something and you're interested in it, we can put you in contact with them so that you don't have to spin your wheels trying to figure it out. So, we really would hope we would like to change business so that we're not providing the non-bindings the way we have, so that we can avoid all that in the beginning and be more collaborative. So we're totally willing to change how we do business. So whatever input you have and whatever time you guys can get us invited for, we'd be all open for it. So having said that, just real quickly, the format is kind of a how-to manual for how you prepare a solid waste plan. The EPA is required to provide that by law. And it really just specifies the information that the people that you need to get ratification from need to understand in order to say, yes, we do or don't like it. And then the stuff that we need to approve a plan. And I kind of compare it to the permit for a landfill, although a solid waste plan is a lot more squishy than a landfill permit would be. So it's not really a good comparison, but it's what we usually say. So there are 4 pieces to the format. This wasn't how I wanted it to play out, but in order to make it seem a little bit usable, we made 4 different things. So there's the instructions, which is really the main document. It's a PDF. There's a working version, which I'm going to go over each of these pieces very briefly. There's a workbook to manage your data, and then there's instructions for the workbook. And all 4 of those things make up the format. We issued format 4.1, I think, last year after we updated the state plan, and we kind of simplified some things. We do intend to go back again and revisit it and try to simplify it even further. We just haven't had the chance to do that since we originally issued it. So the instructions, it's a big document. provides the structure of a plan. It provides detailed instructions for how you do evaluations of your data and make projections. There's a lot of prompts in there for things to consider. I'm one of those people who needs lots of triggers to make me think, because I can't necessarily think of it all on myself. So I wrote it the way I think. And so that's why all those prompts are in there. There's some examples in terms of analyzing data and conclusions you can draw. And then the big part, which I'm going to talk about at the back, is kind of a strategic thinking module that we've got in there. So let's talk, first of all, about the working version. So it's just a stripped down version of the instructions. We removed all the stuff that doesn't need to be in there, but we retained all of the headings, the table headings, all of those kinds of things, so that you can just start writing your plan from it. And that's the Word document. The Excel workbook, I have to thank Adam Cummins, because this is not something I could have ever done on my own. He created a workbook for you to manage data. It's in Excel. And a lot of the spreadsheets are linked, so that if you put information the very first time, then it's carried through the workbook, so that you don't have to worry about making a mistake every time that it's entered. There are also, are you guys getting feedback? Did it go away?
Yeah, we got a little bit, but it went away.
Okay, good. So there's embedded formulas that will automatically do a lot of the calculations that you need. So for example, when you get back to the generation portion of it, that's all automated. So you don't have to enter anything. It takes the data from previous spreadsheets and just automatically calculates all that for you. And then there's some supplemental information that we put in there just to try to help with your analysis. It just provides different kinds of statistics that you can look at just to think about when you're trying to do your evaluation. The instructions, it's a standalone. I think it's, again, a PDF. There are some basic tips for using Excel. There are a lot of instructions for how to complete your tables. There's pictures of all of them. And then we have some examples of some of the tables just so you can see how they would come out. So now I'm going to give you a couple words of advice. The workbook is a wonderful tool, but it is not protected and you can mess it up. So if you alter the workbook, you're doing it at your own risk. If you're like me, it's easy to delete a formula. It's easy to overwrite it. If you do that, it's going to mess it up. So I would leave it alone as much as possible. If there's rows, columns that you need, I would just leave them. You can hide them if you want to, but I'm even hesitant to do that because I can mess it up doing that. So just make sure that you're not the person who messes up the workbook. You're the one who doesn't mess with it. Just like you want to be the Einstein, right? So let's talk a little bit about really the main portion. I'm sorry, I'm going to just make sure I'm not missing anything here by looking at my notes. One of the reasons that we tried to automate the data the way we did was to try to free up your time from having to manage it, to think more strategically about where you want your solid waste district to be over the next 5 or 6 years. And so we created what I kind of call a module within the middle of the format. And it's really a structure for evaluating a lot of different factors and things that can go into planning for how you want to operate under this solid waste plan. So there's 14 analyses. I kind of think of them as mini studies. When we go back through the format, there's some of them that we really don't need in there. There's some that we, oh my gosh, I'm getting a bajillion calls. There are some that we can combine together because they're kind of duplicative. It was kind of an idea that we rolled out in the beginning, which we still think is a good idea to help think strategically, but I think we can simplify it so it's not as overwhelming as it is. And really the idea is that you're giving your policy kind of an overview of all of the things that they need to think about when they're trying to figure out, what kind of programming do we want to provide. And so there's lots and lots of prompts in there, again, because that's how I think. In terms of ways to do your analyses, each one of those prompts is not what's important. You don't have to deal with any of them if you don't want to. They're just suggestions for things to think about. It may seem overwhelming at first, but this is one of those areas that if we're involved in the beginning, we can kind of help direct your energy to say, based on the kind of programming or your situation, we would kind of recommend you focus more here than here. And a lot of times with these analyses, what's really what's important for one district may not be the same for another. So for example, Dan Wickerham in Brown County doesn't have much of an industrial sector. So there's really not much point in him spending much time on analyzing that sector. Whereas if you look at one of the more, manufacturing heavy counties, that would be more of an issue for them. So you're not necessarily going to have to spend time on all of them because they may not all be applicable to you. And really, again, we're just trying to give the policy committee a full understanding of the solid waste district so that they can make as informed decisions as they possibly can. So when you're doing the analyses, kind of the way it's laid out is you would evaluate the performance of what you have in place already, and then kind of identify within what you're doing, what are our successes, where are our misses, where do we have gaps, what is it that we do particularly well. You want to kind of look back at your plan to say, okay, here's what we thought was going to happen. Here's what actually happened in reality. And is there a way that we can learn what actually happened and apply to a program that we want to continue moving forward with? And then it just gives you an overview of what are the needs out there from all of your constituents. What you do with that information is you do the analysis, you draw whatever conclusions you have to draw from what you've learned, and then kind of think of it in terms of, okay, now based on what we've learned, what are all the things that we could do as a district in the upcoming planning period? And the actions, if you think about the analyses really in-depthly, the number of actions you have would probably be the list would be a lot larger than what you could actually do. So just because something is on your list of actions does not mean you have to do it. It just means that you're giving the policy committee choices. Here's, of all the things we think we could do, what do you think is the most important? So those would be your priorities. And then based on that, you develop your programming. So, we're never going to look at your analyses and see a list of actions and say, well, you listed them all, so you really should do them all. That's not the point of this. So let me talk next about how we kind of envision when you're going through and doing a plan using the format, how it works. So the first step that you would do is take all of your reference information and enter it into the workbook so that it's all there up front. And then the next thing you would do is conduct those analyses, because you can't really do any projections until you know what you're going to do and how that's going to affect your numbers. Once you do that, you draw your conclusions, make your decisions, and then make all your projections in the workbook based on what you think is going to happen by the programs that you're providing. So for example, if you were doing, I don't know, you had a community that wanted to implement a new curbside recycling program, then that would affect how much you're recovering. So then you could add to your projection for how much you're recovering based on that. At that point, then you would complete all the appendices, and the appendices, the format, I should have said this, the format's broken down into two parts. The front is kind of like an executive summary that consists of 6 chapters, which is supposed to summarize the stuff that the people who need to ratify need as a quick reference just to understand what they're doing. And then the appendices are really meant for the geeks like EPA and people who like data. It's really the stuff that we need to decide whether or not your plan is approvable. So that's why you go back and do the appendices, and then you'll write the chapters and put in any tables that you need for those chapters at the very sort of at the very last thing. So when we're redoing a review of a plan, here's what we're really looking for. So first of all, does your data match what has been reported in the past? If it doesn't, it's not necessarily a big deal because people get more data after you submit an ADR, right? You might get additional surveys after the fact. There's a place in the format for you just to simply say, this is why our numbers don't match, and then all is good. We're trying to take the focus so much off of the data and give you more ability to do the planning portion. Then from our perspective, in order to approve it, we need to be able to know that the plan meets the goals that it's supposed to do. And then finally, the last thing we look for is the plan transparent. So that would really be for your constituents. If they're trying to ratify the plan, are they going to understand, here's what the money that we're giving you to run your district is going for. Here's what we think we're going to get out of it. Here's how much it's going to cost. So you're not writing a plan to make us happy. You're writing a plan for us to make sure that we can approve it. The happy part should really go for your constituents. So a lot of times we hear people say, well, we need to write it this way to make EPA happy, but that's not what we're looking for. So then in summary, what are we really hoping that you will do? Use the best available information that you have to make decisions. It's a six. You have to try to project out for a number of years. Everybody knows that that's impossible. So all we're doing is just ask to do the best job that you possibly can. And if your decisions seem to make sense on where you've been in the past, we're good to go. Make informed strategic decisions based on your analyses. Identify the programs and services that you'll have available. Make sure that you can be financially solvent. That would be the one thing that would be a killer for us if you couldn't demonstrate staying in the black in your plan. And then make a good faith effort to do the planning process. Overall, the plan should really be a strategy for implementing programs, not a strategy for making decisions after it's ratified. That's the part that makes it so that it's not transparent. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit more understanding of what it is we're looking for. And, there's all kinds of ways to build flexibility in the plan. If you have a lot of uncertainty and you're not sure how to do it, there's a lot of ways to build flexibility in there. Talk to us at any point. Writing the non-bindings is not our favorite thing because it almost feels like we're nitpicking at you. And so we would like to get away from doing that too, which is why we'd like to be involved in the beginning. So I'm going to kind of end it there and just open it up for whatever questions people might have for me, or if you want to wait for questions till the end, that's fine too.
Yeah, thanks, Ernie. We can go ahead and take questions now, and then there'll also be an opportunity for Q&A at the end after everyone speaks. And just wanted to let everyone know too, if they want, they can type questions into the chat box if they think of something during the presentations and don't want to interrupt.
Ernie, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned in the beginning that you wanted more of a collaborative approach. So we're nearing the end of ours, and we have collaborated, but
yes.
I'm wondering if there's like a section that I, either of the workbook or like an analysis that I think it would be really helpful for you or Matt to review. Is that something you'd be open to, is looking at that before we put it out
Sure.
there?
Yeah, I mean, we're here as a resource for you to help make this go smoother for you. So, however you need to rely on us. There's only 2.5 of us right now. So, our time could be limited depending on how much you want us to look at and how close you are towards the end. So, the sooner that you can involve us, the better. But we'll do whatever we can do to help out.
I get a question on the chat. Where do you get the files?
I'm sorry, the files?
The files for the format and writing the plan. I think, Ernie, you sent me a nice detailed explanation of where to find those things. I could actually just send that out to the group if you want, because I think it looked like it took some effort for you to type all that out with the new website.
It's all on the website, but honestly, we can send you the workbook for your specific district. Because, for example, in the capacity section, the stupid landfill thing that you have to show that there's enough capacity. We have all that information, so we can just enter that into a spreadsheet for you, so you don't have to do it. And then we can forward you that workbook. So if you just tell us, we're getting ready to start using it, just let your planner know that we need the workbook, and we'll send that to you. Everything else is available on the webpage, but I probably shouldn't say this in a public recording, but our website is not necessarily the easiest to navigate. So when it comes time for you to get ready, just call us and we'll help you walk through where to find it. I can send you the link where all of this stuff is posted, but I can't really send you specific links for each thing. So just contact us when it's time, and we'll send you the workbook and we can help you find the files.
Thank you. I had a question for you. Based on your slides, I like how you had the steps written out there, and it looks like the first 3 steps would take up the bulk of your time in terms of planning, deadlines for each portion. Would you agree to allocate the most time to those first 3 steps then?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully entering the reference year data shouldn't be that hard since most of it is available. That part should go smoothly. The analyses, I would guess, if you do them right, they can take a while. But, we don't expect a book. So we're not expecting you to provide 100 pages of write-up of these analyses. You can do brief, You can do it any way you want to. I mean, this is your plan. So if you want to see somebody who really wrote a lot, you can look at Cuyahoga's plan. But we would never expect anybody to go to that level of writing up their analyses. You can use bullet points. You can use whatever you want to write those up. So yes, I would expect that part. And then doing the projections might take a little bit of time. The rest of it should go quicker, but Carol and Michelle can probably tell you better from having done it themselves.
Thank you. Well, if there's no more questions for Ernie right now, that sounds like a good segue to let someone else. I don't know if Carol or Michelle want to speak next, or if Dan, you want to go. Any volunteers, or I can just pick someone.
I'll go next if you want.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, just as a brief background, we've done our plan ourselves for the last 3 or 4 times. And part of why we did that, instead of having a consultant do it, is that once our plan was written and approved, I spent the next 5 years listening to complaints about what the consultant did to us and what they made us do. And I got tired of listening to that. So the way we restructured our planning process puts the policy committee right in control. They're the ones that are making the decisions, putting in the programs that we're going to do. And if they don't like it afterwards, they have no one to blame but themselves. And it has worked out beautifully. No more complaints. They know that they're the ones that are driving the train. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and Hannah's got my handouts just in case it doesn't work. I start, we have 4 counties. We have very strong opinions in those 4 counties. We have 2 large counties, 2 small counties, a 29-member policy committee. So we have lots of people, lots of opinions, lots of conflicting directions that they'd like to go. So here's what we do. I start with the timeline, and Ernie alluded to this. I give this to the policy committee right at the beginning of the planning process. It has all of the steps that we need to do, and it has all of the dates. So they get this throughout the process, and we do the check marks so they can see where they are in the process, and they know what the next step is. It also gives them the information that they need to know, yes, this is an important meeting. You have to be there because we have to pass a resolution. So we need a quorum. That sometimes is a little hard when you have a lot of busy people. So this is something that these dates, we start with the one that is our deadline that EPA gives us, and we work our way backwards as to how much time each step's going to take, work our way forwards. So we've got a complete layout of start to finish of when our plan is going to be done. Over to the side, we make notes of what needs to happen and who needs to do it. So that's the first one. Uh-oh. Okay. Now I'm going to share one more thing, and this is something that we can send you. It's a Word document. This is a document that we give to all of the policy committee members. I'm not sure if you're seeing what I'm seeing there. Sorry, I'm trying to make it so that I can't tell what you guys are seeing. Are you seeing my Word document?
We see it.
Okay. So there's 6 pages to this document. We created subcommittees for our policy committee, and they have to sign up for 1 or more of them. And we make it something we do in a policy committee meeting so that nobody can ditch out and not do anything. So each of the committee members signs up for as many subcommittees as they want to work on. We have solid waste disposals. We have for each of these what their purpose is, what their tasks are, which part of the plan they're going to be working on, the appendices that they're responsible for creating, and what specific issues they're going to be addressing. We use this to build the agendas for their subcommittee meetings. And we work through this one at a time and for as long as it takes for them to get through it. So for the solid waste disposal systems, we invite the health departments to be involved with this. We invite the haulers and the landfill operators, people outside the policy committee as well, if we think that they can give some good either data or direction. For the residential recycling subcommittee, we make sure that the people running the 4 county drop-off programs are invited. We invite private recyclers. That's pretty much it for that one. With the business, we definitely divide residential from business recycling. In the business recycling, we put the emphasis more on private recyclers to be involved. And we have great success because we have a couple in our district that are, number one, willing to be on the subcommittees and help direct that. But they also can tell us, here are the services that we can offer the businesses, and you can write that into your plan. We have an outreach and marketing subcommittee, and their sole purpose is to put together the outreach part of our plan. I invite the education specialists to be on that because they're not on the policy committee, but they have all of the boots on the ground experience with what works and what doesn't work. So we rely heavily on them for the analysis portion of it. Special wastes and optional programs, that's a catch-all for people who don't necessarily have a great interest in this and just want to sign up for something so that they're involved. We get township trustees on this. We get some of our citizen members on this. It's probably like the one that takes the least amount of time. This one is the most important, finances. They meet last. After the other subcommittees have met, they've made their decisions, they've made their recommendations for what's going to go into the plan. Then each of those subcommittees has to create a budget for what they've come up with. They're responsible for the 10-year budget and what it's going to cost to do what they said they wanted to do. That does take a little time, and it takes them a little time to get that input. Once we have all of it from all 4 counties, we bring the finance committee together. It has made more success for us when we ensure that there's a commissioner from all 4 counties on that subcommittee. Because in the past, our board of directors and our policy committee have not always agreed on what the plan should say and what they should be allowed to do. Our board wants the plan to be as vague and abstract as possible so that they can do whatever they want later on. The policy committee wants to make sure that the programs that they feel are important are in there. So if the commissioners are on the finance committee, they're involved in putting this together. And I have to say that this last plan, the one that we're working on right now, this was the most difficult finance committee process we've ever had. We have reducing revenue. And even though I was able to explain to them why it's happening and how long it might last, there was quite a bit of a level of denial on their part for wanting to blame it on COVID and it's going to go away and things are going to get better. We're going to have all this money again. And this took quite a few meetings for them to absorb the data, to understand that, no, we don't have as much money as we used to. And they had to make very hard decisions about which programs could be included in the plan and which ones had to be kicked out. This was the hardest one that they've ever done because they're not used to that. It's not something that they're used to working on. But because the commissioners were involved start to finish, once this went out for ratification and it went to the 4 counties to ratify, they were familiar with it. They were on board with it. They didn't necessarily like it, but they understood it and understood why we had to do it that way. And so it's just an easier process all along. And once we get to implementation, I'm at least going to have 4 commissioners that understand why we're doing what we're doing. So the finance committee will get their recommendations together. And once all of those committees have their pieces in place, it goes to the full policy committee. They each give their little summary of here's our part of the plan. And only then does the whole policy committee have their discussion and decide, do we accept this all as a package? Do we tweak parts of it? By the time it gets here, they have done so much work on it themselves, and each one of them has such ownership in their portion of it, that part goes very smoothly for us because they're willing to accept what another member came up with because they know the work that went into it. So for that part, the policy committee usually passes it without long discussions at that point. That was my portion of it, how to get it in front of them and how to move it forward with their involvement. Obviously, if you have fewer counties or if you have people who don't really care what the plan says, this won't be your process. This is for those of us who have lots of people, lots of opinions, and people who don't like to spend a lot of time going through all of those analysis. It breaks it down into a much more manageable portion for each person. And that is all I had.
Thank you, Carol. I, for one, just want to say I love your spreadsheets and the Word document that you have there. And I made sure to save those. I think they'll be useful when I'm starting to work on my plan. And so I really appreciate you sharing that with the group. And also, it's really impressive how you seem to have been able to foster that level of ownership in your policy committee and assisting you with writing the plan. And was wondering if you had any tips for, or, have you always had that level of ownership of where you've had members writing the budget? Sounds like they're actually doing some of the work that I know our district policy committee hasn't done that level of work in the past. So do you have any tips for how you guided them in doing that, or getting members to become more active in the planning process?
This shouldn't be recorded, but what I tell them is, you will do this or I will do this for you. And you're not going to like what I write for you. And they have worked with me long enough that they believe me. So since they're the ones that have to live with it, they want the ownership, really. They are the ones that are going to have to implement it for 5 years. So they want it to be their vision of it. And really my job is just to not to make them make a certain decision that I would want them to make, but just to keep them at the table until they've made a decision that is the general consensus that they can all live with. I'll give you a good example. We had in our new plan, the one that's going out now, vastly reduced funding for health and sheriff because we just don't have the money for it anymore. So they finally decided we're going to go to a reimbursement method. It's going to be a lot less money. We don't like it, but we have to do it because we don't have enough money for that program anymore. Obviously, when it came to the policy committee, the health department representatives didn't like it, and they voiced that opinion. But when it comes down to it, what do you want to cut out of the plan so that you can have the money that you want? They're at a loss because they understand at that point that for them to get more money, it means taking it away from someone else. So it's just, for me, it has become more facilitation, keeping them at the table. They know that they have to read the draft. I send them drafts. I'll take what they've come up with. I'll write a draft and I'll send it back to each subcommittee and say, is this what you agreed to? Is this what you wanted? They know they have to read it, because if they don't, I might put something in there that they don't like and make them commit to something that they might not want to have committed to just because I think it's important. And they know me well enough to know that I might do that, which I really wouldn't, but don't tell them that. So it works. At least for us, it works.
Thank you. About how much time would you say, or how many meetings do you think your subcommittees would hold to accomplish the tasks that they're assigned on average?
The easier ones, the special waste, the solid waste disposal, take one meeting because they don't really have a lot that they need to work through. We have 3 landfills, so we've got plenty of disposal, and theirs is a relatively easy task. We've got our systems in place now so that we're not making radical changes. So the other committees might take 2 or 3 meetings. A third one might be just to wrap it up and say, here's everything. Are you happy with what you've got? And this time we did a lot virtually with Zoom meetings. So we could have more and it wouldn't take up as much of their time. And it worked out really well. Finance, I think we might have had 4 meetings this time, only because the first 2 were just getting them to understand that they had work to do.
Carol, I love that you were able to share that because it's very interesting to see you are so close to, my 4 counties and how different everything is handled. And you kind of hit the nail on the head though with saying that, you guys have 3 landfills. We have none. But just the ownership that your policy committee has over that is amazing because I cannot get that type of commitment in mine. And I will say maybe I have out of my 29, I have 6 that I would say are very committed and wants to help, wants to see these things. But the rest I feel like are just there to be there. Just doesn't respond as well. So yeah, props to you and being able to have that kind of relationship with them. I feed them lunch, so I don't know, what else I can do, but yeah, that's great. And, hopefully someday, they'll start seeing the vision that, we have for the district, and build that relationship up, that they'll want to be a part of it and speak and, voice their opinions on how everything is going.
We do have some subcommittee meetings where there's a bunch of people around the table staring off into space. So, there are some that will be on the subcommittees just because I made them, but at least they're hearing it. At least they're hearing the planning process. They're familiar with what goes into it. So by the time they have to vote on it, it's not the first time they've heard everything. Oh, I will give you another tip as Ernie's staring off into space. EPA has been so helpful with us. A couple plans ago, we had people that were very adverse to evaluating their own programs. They wanted to sit in the subcommittee meetings and say how perfect they were and how they can't improve upon anything they do because everything they do is so wonderful. I brought EPA reps to those subcommittee meetings and had them ask questions. And it was a brainstorming session, but the way the questions were asked of those people, they couldn't blow it off and just say, oh, but we can't improve because we're already doing everything wonderfully. They had to start doing a little bit more of a self-analysis. And so, yes, bring EPA guys in, have them help you when people are not so willing to talk, because it really does help.
I didn't pay her to say that.
You have helped us with so much over the years, getting people to talk.
I appreciate that, Carol. Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Carol this time? All right, thanks, Carol. Do we want to move on to Michelle or Dan? Is that a volunteer?
So Carol, I am also super impressed with how much you have your policy committee involved. I only have 7 people, and it's a struggle. So, all right. So I am going to mostly talk about the plan analysis section. We just to touch on it, we have a similar Excel worksheet kind of timeline planning out the steps that Carol showed. And we follow that, and it's really helpful. And it's also really satisfying to strike through each of the things you finish. So I highly recommend you do something like that. But I'm going to talk mostly about Appendix H, which are the analyses. So when we dive into our plan, we're really looking at it as a chance to do strategic planning, to do continuous improvement, try to see what's working, what's not working, and how can we make things better. So these were kind of the analyses that we were looking at, and the highlighted ones are ones that we, for this plan that we're working on right now, hired a consultant. So the last plan that Hamilton County did, we did it totally in-house. And that was the one that started in 2018 that we're currently under. And we use the new format. And I'll say it's completely doable. I don't think you have to hire anyone out to do it. The prompts that are in the format that Ernie and his team have put together are wonderful. They really help you decide, what you should be thinking about, ask the right questions. And it really makes it easy to put together the text part of it. And the workbook is also fantastic. So I don't think you have to hire it out. In fact, I think our plan that we wrote in this new format was the best plan we ever did. And it was, the first plan that we had done in-house. So it's not something that you have to hire out. For this time, we could afford it, and I really wanted help. When we did it ourselves, though, we did have to cut back on programming, right? You have to take the time from somewhere. So we decided for that year, we just weren't going to do as much programming, kind of cut back our goals. So I didn't really want to do that, and we could afford it. And then there were also some areas that we really wanted to dive into and wanted outside perspective, which I think is the benefit of hiring outside help, is that you get other ideas, right? Sometimes it's hard for us to come up with new ideas. So we hired a consultant for the highlighted sections for the analyses, and had them focus on that. And then we focused on the other analyses. So we did not have them do the whole thing. It has really been a chance for us to step back and take the time to consider the programs, really analyze them. And I will say, and Carol touched on this, sometimes it's hard for staff to do that. Sometimes we become really emotionally attached to programs and, can get stuck in this is how we've always done it. But I'm a big proponent of continuous improvement and think it's an important step. So we did it. So I'm going to touch on the ones that are highlighted because those are the ones we hired out and kind of talk through those. We combined the commercial and industrial, mostly because our programs for the commercial and industrial are very similar, if not the same. So to us, we do have an industrial sector. Obviously, we're an urban county, but to us, it just makes more sense to talk about them as a whole group. But we also did a highlight on multifamily. So we really, we consider multifamily the business sector because that's how the waste haulers consider it. And so they are considered a business, but they're a strange business, right? Because you have people living there. So they're kind of a crossover between residents and businesses. And we also had a lot of interest from our policy committee and outside stakeholders on multifamily. So we've really taken a look at multifamily. But we hired this one out because we wanted help figuring out our business programs and what businesses we should target and how we should go about that. Right now, we kind of just help whoever calls us. And so we wanted a way to kind of hone in on that, because when we look at our waste, most of our waste is coming from the business sector. commercial in particular. The other piece that we wanted help with was the waste composition study. We have done a residential waste composition study at Rumpke Sanitary Landfill in our county, but we did not do a commercial recently, like in the last decade. So we needed help looking outside and, what similar counties have done waste composition studies. So our consultant used Franklin County because it's a similar size county to us, similar makeup, and SWACO did some great waste composition studies. So we just stole their data and saved 200 grand. And so that's who we use for our commercial sector. But we knew that organics was going to be a big piece of it. So that's what we kind of focused on for that. And then we're in the process right now of working with our consultant to set a diversion goal. So we've already passed the state mandated goals. And we kind of want to have a pie in the sky aspirational by this year. We're going to reach this goal. And so we're going to use that data to set that goal. That's not part of the format, but that's just something we wanted to do. The special programs is one where you can kind of choose what you want to focus on. And for us, it was our new environmental enforcement program. So we started that in 2018. We wanted someone from the outside. So it was nice to have the consultant that they can be kind of evaluating it. It's not me being critical of the sheriff's office. It's the consultant. What can we do better? What things aren't working? How can we get better measurement on this? So it was a really tough program to evaluate, and that's why we wanted help on that. And then our data collection was another area. This was another analysis that we needed outside ideas, like how can we do this better? What technology is out there that would make it easier? We're really, I feel like, in the Stone Age in this area. I feel like there could be so much better ways of doing our data collection, not only for the annual district report, but for just collecting our data for our programs, our technical assistance and all that. So we got outside help for that. The other thing that we did, which is totally off the wall and not part of the format either, was we hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And we really wanted someone to look at our programs through that lens and tell us, are there parts of Hamilton County, our audiences, that we're not reaching? Are there things that we could do better to improve our communications to different audiences? And a big thing that came up in that, which is just wrapping up now, is we don't measure our programs based on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We do not collect the right data. We don't ask people what their race, age, all of that information is. And so I've always felt a little like, oh, we shouldn't ask that. But our DEI consultant was like, yes, you need to measure that if you want to see how you're doing. So that's a big change that we're making even right now. And I'm required to put that slide on all of our presentations. So that's all the slides that I had. A couple things that I stop sharing that. Just tidbits that I was thinking of. I really think it's important to lean on Ohio EPA and ask them questions. Ernie and Matt have been great about getting back to me about, just random questions that I have as I'm going through it, especially with the workbook. I was struggling, pulling data. And so it was really helpful to ask them questions on that. And then leaning on other districts too. We've done a lot of looking at what other districts are doing, asking for data. And everyone is so generous with their time and answering my questions, and also just sending me what they have. And in fact, we have 2 staff people up in Cuyahoga County right now, looking at their household hazardous waste and how they do that. And they've organized a whole 2-day tour for them. So I just really think we've got a great group here in Ohio, and leaning on each other is really important. The other less fuzzy feel-good things I have would be, we did our analyses, we worked in separate documents. So each analysis has its own Word document in our folder. And I think that's really helpful when you're asking like staff or policy committee to review those and then put them all together at the end. Don't try to do it all in one. It's been a really easy way. Then this is how we did it last time. It's easy to copy and paste and put them all together in one document at the end, but having the separate documents has been really helpful to us. And then we came up with our format ahead of time. So you have the EPA format, then you can just use that. We wanted ours to be a little prettier. So we came up with, our fonts and all of that stuff ahead of time, which is helpful. So that's all I have. I don't know if there are any questions for me.
What are you saying, Michelle? Are you saying ours is boring?
Yeah, it's pretty boring, Ernie, but that's okay.
Well, that's what we do at the state. We don't put more effort than we have to.
Maybe that's a suggestion for the format 4.2. You can use Michelle's fonts.
Yeah, jazz it up a little bit. Calibri instead of Arial.
Well, all right. Thanks, Michelle. I was able to look at one of your draft strategic analyses because that's what I'm kind of worried about when looking into the future on doing the new format. Is it seems like that will take up a lot of time. So it was nice to see what another district has put together. Seems really thorough and would echo what you were saying about reaching out to other districts. Every time I've had a question and ask EPA if they know what district is doing what, and then called someone up, and they're always eager and never hesitate to share their data or their documents or what they've been doing. So if there's new coordinators out there listening, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to some other districts and ask for help.
Hannah, the one thing I'll say is, the analyses, you're not really doing those for us, you're doing them for you. And so when as much record as you want to keep at the district is up to you. For the write-up, you don't have to provide us nearly as much as what you might want to have in-house. So when it comes to the write-up, just contact us and say, what is it you really look for in here? Because what'll end up happening is we'll review them and a lot of questions will come up in our mind. Well, did you think about this? Did you think about that? So it's not meant to be a knock on you. It's really meant to be more of a helpful thing in terms of, well, here's something we thought about. What about you? So just contact us ahead of time to ask about the write-up so that you're not spending way too much time putting stuff in the plan.
Okay, thank you. I know one question I had for those of you that have done the strategic analyses of your programs. Are there any programs that you're considering changing because of the strategic analysis, and what are those programs?
I can say it because we're just like fresh in this right now. Our yard trimmings program, we compared our yard trimmings drop off to Montgomery County's yard trimmings drop off. And I don't think there's anyone from Montgomery County on, but they are just rocking it up there. I mean, I think they're like making money on their yard trimmings drop off program, and we're like spending $200,000 a year on it. So we're looking at them and seeing what they're doing, and how can we do? They have an advantage that they have a facility and we don't. But doing those kinds of things where you look at like the dollars per ton that we spend compared to what other districts spend. And our household hazardous waste is the same way. So we spend so much dollars per ton on that it hurts, and it's really ineffective. We reach less than 1% of the population. So we're trying to change that program too.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Michelle or the group? All right, thanks, Michelle. We can move on to Dan.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So this is a part of the presentation. I don't have any screen to share. So what I'm going to say is, if you're not wearing your pajamas and you're still awake, if you can turn your camera on, Michelle, you just tried to sneak out, but it is nice when I can see everybody's smiling faces. I wanted to just kind of give you a little bit of a background about Brown County, and I really wasn't going to start with that, but now in hearing Carol and Michelle's take on things, it really struck me there's some very key differences here. You know, I work in Brown County. Brown County is a rural county. We're an agriculture county. As Ernie alluded to in the beginning, we don't really have much of an industrial base. So we have a little over 40,000 population, single county district. We are an authority instead of just a solid waste district. So we don't have a separate policy committee, but the policy committee, the functions of the policy committee and the board are together in a 9-member board that also includes all 3 of our commissioners. So it does kind of simplify the process a little bit. I have a lot less to manage than, you know, like Carol, for instance. The other things, we have 1 waste hauler essentially in our county. We have 1 landfill. We have 1 recycling provider for the most part, and we actually control that. It's Adams Brown Recycling. So in a lot of ways, it's just night and day to what Carol might have to manage, for instance, or on the scale that Michelle or some of the others will manage. So what I really wanted to start with was a polling question. And the problem is I don't know how to do polling questions. I've seen them done on there. I don't know how to do them. I was going to ask Ernie for a little technical support on this one to get this set up, but then I decided I'd just do it this way. So you really don't have to respond, but I'm going to ask these questions. And the first question would have been, how many of you feel like you have boards that are not engaged in your planning process, or you'd like to get them more engaged in the planning process? And matter of fact, Erica was talking about that, you know, and Hannah kind of alluded to that, which is a little bad because I kind of serve on her policy committee. But anyways, the next question, though, is how many of you have boards that want to stick their nose in your business all the time and they want to control everything you do? Yeah. And so that's the opposite problem. And then I would really ask the question, how many of you have both? Because it can be both things. They can not really be engaged, but want to kind of micromanage what you do. So I don't have, you know, a lot of secret special, you know, information here, but I got some ideas. And so, you know, first of all, first idea is thinking about our roles. And, you know, our roles are as a local solid waste professional. So we have certain things we're supposed to do. And one of the things I think about my role is to kind of know what the problems and the deficiencies or the challenge in my district is. And that's something you just gather, you know, all year long. Every year, you're just kind of looking at what the problems are in your district as it relates to solid waste. The next one is understanding the bottlenecks, because that's usually where you fix those problems. And then I see my role as envisioning the solutions. And a lot of times that envisioning the solution comes from networking. So that comes from just what we're doing now and going to meetings and talking to the other solid waste districts. How have you solved this problem? Michelle was talking about that some, and that's, you know, that's always been my go-to. If I got a problem, I want to see what somebody else is doing about the same problem. And then my goal is to educate, or my job is to educate the decision makers. Now, the board I see as my decision makers, and I'll come back to them. That's mostly what I'm going to talk about. And then the third player in this, the third, you know, kind of looking at the roles, would be EPA. And EPA's roles are mainly to help us. That's their number one role. And, you know, they're very willing to do that, as others have alluded to. Their role is also to meet the statewide goals. And the way they meet the statewide goals is by helping us meet our goals. And if we all meet our goals and do our planning right, then we meet the statewide goals. And then the third role of EPA, of course, is to sometimes be the bad guy. And they're not comfortable doing that sometimes. And that is exactly the opposite of Ernie's personality in particular. But the reality is we sometimes need them to be the bad guys. And the fact that they are at arm's length from us, you know, we sometimes need somebody to blame things on. But going back to the board, one of the problems that it's hard for people to concede power, you know, to the board. Like, we're the professionals, we're the ones that are making the decisions. And it is sometimes difficult, you know, getting that input, because sometimes they run off the rails a little bit. But we have tremendous power in that we're the ones who set the agenda, and we're the ones who ask the questions. So, you know, Carol talked very eloquently about how she brought the personnel committee, I'm sorry, the policy committee, I'm dealing with something else on the personnel, the policy committee in on making these decisions in the process. But if any of you guys know Carol like I know Carol, it's not just a free for all. There is some control there. And that control is that Carol gets to set the agenda. She makes that spreadsheet she showed you, and she also gets to kind of frame the question. And so framing the question has a lot to do with kind of our control. And this is not about power. It's just about keeping everybody on track. So if you can get everybody asking the right question, then you want them to really make the decision. Now, what I found is sometimes when it does run off the rails, when the board makes a different decision than what I would make, the problem as I analyze that is not that they just made the wrong decision. The problem is usually I haven't given them enough information. So I have to ask myself, what do I know that's different than what they know that's caused them to come to a different conclusion? Sometimes it can just be a matter of time. Sometimes it takes me a while to come around to a decision to realize this is the best way to do things. So that's kind of my two-step analysis. If they come up with a different answer than I come up with, then my go-to is, first of all, what did I forget to tell them? You know, what did I know that I just assume they know that they really don't? Or number two, do they just need more time to get to the point? And to that, one of my techniques that I use is we're having a discussion and I've kind of put the question out there and they're talking about this. If this thing is going completely wrong, not going the direction I want to, then my go-to is, let's think about that for a little while. I'll get a little more information. We'll come back to that question because you don't want to get to a final answer in a vote if you know the vote's going to be something you don't want to live with. So we kind of always have the option to kind of slow things down a little bit. And I find that then I have time to do my little two-step analysis, get more information, get back to them, and time to get with members if they have a particular perspective that I'm not understanding so that I can understand where they're coming from. And usually we can get to something good then. So here's my other little nugget of advice. It's just a different way of thinking about something you all do. And that is that boards by nature love to make money decisions. That's kind of how they're wired. That's how your commissioners spend a lot of their time is deciding on money. And it's very important because messing the money up is what gets people in trouble on boards. You don't usually hear somebody going to jail for coming up with a boneheaded policy about something. But when the money doesn't add up, something's missing or whatever, then somebody might be going to jail. And so people tend to pay attention when you're dealing with money. And I look at money as resources. It's your potential, it's your potential energy in the system to solve problems in the future. So everybody's interested in the money. So one of the things as a solid waste director, I think is important is to know the 10 allowable uses very well, to be used, ready to kind of roll those out. Because how many times do you get somebody coming from the community who has a great idea of how they can help you spend your money for their project? And sometimes they are great things. Sometimes, they're like, hey, we want to put new aluminum grandstands at the fairgrounds. And aluminum's recyclable, right? That's probably got some recycled content in it. Could you guys help pay for the new bleachers? And while it's a great thing, if you start down that path, you can have a train wreck real quick. So knowing those 10 allowable uses is important. The most important allowable use of the 10 is number 2. Basically, number 2 is anything that's in your plant. And as a matter of fact, across the state of Ohio, 93% of the money that is spent by a solid waste district goes to allowable use number 2. And the reason I know that is that I knew it was most of it, but I didn't know how much. So I sent Matthew Hittle an email this morning and I said, hey, Matt, where can I find this information? Because I can't find it on the new website. I used to be able to on the old one, but it's there somewhere. But Matt was able to help me out in just an instant. And that's another way, using your planners is useful. But anyway, so 93% of that money goes through allowable use number 2. So if you frame the planning discussion as a negotiation with how we're going to use our money, so essentially, it's an agreement. It is an agreement between you and your board or boards, the policy committee and your board, EPA, and the public, because they have to ratify this. So if you can get everybody to sign off on this is what we're doing in our plan and agreeing on how we're spending our money, then when you want to do one of those things, it's allowable use number 2. So if we'd written the grandstands into the plan as part of our planning process, that we wanted to do that for whatever reason, then it would be an acceptable use. Now, the reality is it might not make all the, the reviews getting to that point, but if it did, then it's in your plan, it's allowable use number 2, and you can do that thing. So I like to frame our planning process in terms of it's kind of a financial negotiation. This is our money. This is how we want to spend it. If you want to have a say in that, if you want to do any of these other things, you need to get it into the plan. So many times I've had to say over the years, people, sorry, got a great idea. It's not one of the allowable uses, or it's not in the plan. Or the alternative, we really need to do this. We really need to expand our curbside recycling in this community or add another drop box because it's in my plan, because it's in our plan. And that is our justification. So anyway, so I see that as a very important process. Now, my planning process is a little simpler because our district's a little simpler. I will tell you, full disclosure here, I've never written a plan in 4 or 4.1. And so I am a little scared of that. I looked over at some last night, getting ready for today, and it looks like a lot of work. But what I really see in that, as you read it, is those analysis that you do are essentially the analysis that we did in the old planning. We just didn't put it on paper. It was the thought process. And so this is kind of like when you're in school and you're in algebra or chemistry and your teacher wants you to show your work. There's a little bit of that, just kind of go through the process, show your work of how you came up with these things. But really the planning process is just the same. It's just a decision-making process. And so what I do is I start early on the decision-making part. I procrastinate on everything else, but the decision-making, I start really early, because what I find is the most empowering thing for a board is to make real decisions. The worst thing you can do for a board is continue to have meetings with no decisions to be made. They really lose interest in that very quick. So you need to have some decisions, but you also can't overwhelm them. And since we live and breathe this, it could be very easy to accidentally overwhelm your board and they just shut down. So the trick is to kind of find that balance in there where they can make some decisions, but not feel completely overwhelmed in the process. So what I do is when it's coming time to write a plan, I start making a list, and this goes on for months as I'm thinking of things, where I will imagine things I would like to do, either solve a problem or look at what somebody else has done and say, man, that's a great thing. I wish we could do that. So I'll make that master list of all these things I'd love for my board to think about, engage in, and maybe consider doing in our plan. So then every week, and we meet monthly, so every month for many, many months before, we actually have to, I do the math so that I got enough time to do this all. I ask them to work on one big question and 1 or 2 little questions, decisions each month. So I will say, let's consider, a different model for our curbside, how we do things. And here's the possibilities. And here's what somebody else has done. This has been the results of what we've done. And good, but we could do better. And what do you think about? And then I'll get them to weigh in on those things. They'll have a discussion, and then I'll do just what Carol was talking about. I will write that up over the next month, and I will give them back to them the next month and said, okay, this is what I understood you to say. And is everybody good with that? And so that does a couple things. One is they see that what you're doing is translating into something real that's going to be in the plan. So it's not all abstract. They see it happening. And I do it topic by topic by topic so that it kind of puts it in little packages for them. So, and it also, if I made a mistake or haven't, because people will throw things out, but they, and they're trying to come to a consensus, but not everything comes to a vote. So if I can see, that if I can get the gist of what they're trying to say, if I've missed something, somebody can interject that. So then the next meeting, we start with reviewing what we talked about last month. Everybody okay? Change a couple little things. Then we move on to a big question and a couple little questions. They make some decisions. They feel good about it. I write it up the next month, and then we get that part of it done. So then I'm doing then after that, or kind of during that, I'm doing the legwork, the analysis, the getting the information, the inventories, and all that filled out. But that's my little system. It is a little simpler, but it's just because my district's a lot simpler. I can make that work. So then, final thought. We talked about flexibility, and somebody mentioned that. And I've thought a lot about that. I was at Ernie. So my intuition is always to write things flexible. And you guys remember our dear friend Paul Brosh, when he wrote a solid waste plan, his thing was he made it as flexible as possible, to the point where you started reading the thing and it might say, the name of our solid waste district might be, whatever. He put in a few words to, give a little, in case we wanted to change that name later, maybe we could. Populations around, but anyways, Paul's mantra was always make everything as flexible as you can. Ernie, I think, was talking about transparency, but I'm going to kind of give you a little different thought about that in that, yes, EPA wants us to be more specific. We want to be flexible, but it can work exactly the other way too. When I talked about we use number 2, what's in our plan, as sort of your justification for what you want to do. The fact that you've made it specific in your plan gives you the power to do exactly what you said. And if you were really vague in that, it would give a lot more room for EPA to come in and say, well, you use this vague language. That's not how we understood it. So that's not really what we think has been approved. So there is value just turning the tables here and making our plans as specific as we can. Now, that said, what we never want to do is to have a major change. I forget the terminology here, but something substantive that causes us to have to redo our plan, because a solid waste district director's life is measured in the number of plans that they have to write over the time. And solid waste district directors have been known to schedule retirement right before they have to start writing the next plan. So you don't want to ever have to do that because you fumbled on something and you didn't put something in that you wish you would have. So I really liked in the new format the idea of the alternate budget, because that idea is it's both flexible and it's specific. So if this happens, then this is how we approach it with a specific answer. And I think that gives us the best of both worlds, and it provides that transparency that EPA is looking for, so the public can really, in good government, can realize what they're voting for. So that's my thoughts. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, really appreciate you speaking on that. Does anybody have any questions for Dan? No? Okay. Well, I really appreciate everyone coming on and speaking. Carol, Dan, Ernie, Michelle, Hannah, thank you for your help for question and answers. This is recorded and we'll be able to post it. Ernie, I think, said he's going to try and post it on the High EPA website, so he'll get that information out to us. So if no one else has anything else, like I said, thanks for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate that everybody's thinking about, how can we do plans ourselves? And I know for a lot of you, you're single people in an office, and it's hard when you're trying to implement programs and then try to write a plan at the same time. So, that's why I say we may be able to help direct your effort to try to help make that a little bit easier. So, just reach out to us whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ernie. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.